There is a playbook, particularly in larger agencies, that you've got to follow. So you can't really be authentically yourself.
Today we're joined by Chris Barr, State Director for Queensland for 6 Degrees Executive.
I do not allow people to go and sit in a room to make a phone call. It is absolutely pointless. The most important thing for me is the feedback loop. There will be really experienced consultants all around you that are listening to what you're saying. You learn by osmosis, so then as soon as you start that just then becomes the norm. 70% of your time spent on candidates will pay dividends in the years to come, and you make that early investment. 3 years later, you've made it. I just easily built an app on Claude that actually helps me with team one-to-ones. For me, that's given me back probably about 3 hours a week. The one piece of advice that's stayed with me throughout all of this is just do it.
Chris, welcome.
Hey Ed, good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Pleasure, great to see you. So we just like to jump straight in here and just get into some of the questions. And I've obviously spent a little bit of time with you. We crossed paths a little bit in our career, but a really great place to start for us is, how did your career start? How did you get into recruitment?
Jeez, I'm going to say this exact same
I know
as what
where this is
everyone else
going.
does. I fell into it. So I'll take you back 2014. I'd taken a career break from the role I had in the UK. So I was in senior retail operations. I was running 51 supermarkets in the southeast of England. Great job, right? But you're working 70, 80, 90 hours a week. So you just literally work. There was no living in it. And there was just one day I was driving in southeast London and a truck ran into the back of my car, right? Coffee goes everywhere. My suit's ruined. And I was like, stuff this. Like, there's got to be a better life than this, right? That was on the Friday. On the Monday, I'd resigned to my boss for the business I was working with, Farm Foods in the UK. And I thought, I need to take a bit of a career break. And he was like, well, you're crazy, but just go and do it. Can't necessarily keep your job open, but I think you should just go and explore, see how you feel. And we can pick up a conversation.
So you were very open about needing to do that.
I just needed to do it. Like, there was just something in it. I was like, this is the time. You know, you get into your late 20s and you're like, I've given everything to my career up until this point. So anyway, did that. Booked a flight to Australia. The only reason being is it was the furthest away I could possibly go, that I thought, I'm going to get my feet here, because it would be the first time backpacking, because before that was all package holidays, right? So here I arrive in Australia, spend 6 months traveling the East Coast. So started in Sydney, then worked all my way up to Cairns, Cape Tribulation, Daintree, beautiful, had the best time of my life. Arrived back in Brisbane and I thought, I want to actually stay here and make a go of it. What could I do? So I chapped in the doors of Coles, chapped in the doors of Woolies, and they're like, nah, we ain't hiring anybody because we've done a whole load of expat recruitment. I was like, damn.
So at that point, you were in retail.
I really love retail, right? And it was like kind of where I had cut the cloth of what I thought was going to be my corporate career. And I thought end goal for me is CEO by the time I'm 50, and that was ultimate career success. So I called a recruiter back in the UK, a guy by the name of Martin Wells, and he used to recruit store managers, area managers for me. And I was like, mate, do you know anyone in Australia that you could get me into retail? And he's like, no, but I know someone who could talk to you about recruitment. He's like, you'd be perfect for recruitment. I'm like, nah. It's like, I want a real job. Yeah. He's like, look, just have a chat with him. And that person was Richard Wynn. So I had a chat with him. He connected me with someone who's now one of my very good friends, Sam Rocket, and the rest was kind of history. So I started my adventure into recruitment by interviewing out of a backpackers hostel at the top of Roma Street here in Brisbane.
Oh, so you've been, I didn't realise that.
Yeah.
Okay, so it started here and came back here.
Yeah, that was basically it. So in short, went through the process, met with a couple of people from the Queensland business here, and they're like, I think you're too good. Why don't you go to Brisbane or Melbourne? Melbourne or Sydney. And I was like, absolutely, let's do it. So I said, you pick. And when he's like, you're going to Sydney. And I was like, nah, I think Melbourne might be better. He's like, just bloody pick somewhere. Ended up in Melbourne. And then that's where it really started for me. So that was the February 2015.
Do you remember your first day? Like how?
Remember my first day.
Tell me about it. First day at Michael Page, 2015.
I think like for me, because when you work in a career in retail, right? I mean, you're wearing the suits, but you're in and out stores all the time. And you don't really think yourself in a corporate type job. But for me, recruitment was a bit like how you see it through investment bankers, right? It was people in slick suits and, get the gift of the gab. And that's exactly what I found. I walked through the door of the Michael Page office in Melbourne, and everyone is in slick suits. They're predominantly navy, all white shirts, and most people in ties. Though they'd only just started a policy there that you didn't have to wear like a tie on a Wednesday or something like that. But anyway,
very loose.
Very loose. And that was kind of it. It was a busy, bustling office, everyone on the phone. And I was like, this is exactly what I think corporate life actually is. What an eye opener, right? Because that's the thing. It's like day one, you're like rabbit in the headlights. You've been in a senior position before, but you're almost a beginner again because you're in a new industry. You start out as a consultant where, you had a senior title before, and then you're trying to figure out how the hell this thing all works. Yeah. And that was it.
And so tell me about, I guess, what actually was like, in terms of, was there anything in there that was harder than you thought it was going to be? Anything that you just kind of adapted to really well in your first year?
Yeah, I think all of it was actually really, really hard because I think, again, there's a perception of what recruitment actually is to what the reality of it actually is. And for me, it is hard work. You think that because that you've got some smarts behind you, so I'd say I'm pretty smart, get a good commercial head on my shoulders, I could pick up the phone and have a conversation to anyone about anything. But you start making your first couple of calls, candidates and clients, and it's like, they don't want to borrow it. They don't want to hear from you. Pardon the pun. Yeah. But for me, like that was the hard part, is realizing that you have to actually really work hard to build a connection with people on the telephone. That's it. Like it was landlines back in the day, so you're still dialing out on these landline telephones, and for me, I think it was then an appreciation that if you're going to really be good at this, you're going to have to just work your ass off. Yeah. And that was it. But the part that I really struggled with was actually just having the confidence to pick up the phone and have a conversation. Yeah. But I had a really good tutor in Jimmy Jennings. I don't know if you know James Jennings.
I know I know him. Did he start? I started a different company post page. I think.
Well, he set up Source.
That's right. Yeah.
And he came from a retail background as well, I think. And he's like, mate, like you cannot sit there and not make a call. Just pick up the phone and make the bloody call. So here's me handshaking, you do that. But then the more you get into it, the more natural it becomes, and you find out that you're just having a conversation with people. Yeah. But just because that you're a big dog before in a senior role and all that kind of thing, no one cares. Yeah. But it's also that much harder when you don't really have any knowledge of the market here as well.
Sorry to interrupt. There's a really good point there, right? Because I think everybody in recruitment, when they first start at least, that's the bit they're scared about. And you'll see this now running Queensland. I'm sure there are people in your business, even now, who are a bit nervous around that. How do you coach people to kind of get on the phone? Or maybe in reverse, if I'm a recruiter who's starting in my recruitment career, tell me about how to get on the phone and why it's important.
I take a hard rule on it, right? I do not allow people to go and sit in a room to make a phone call. It is absolutely pointless. And as soon as you start that just then becomes the norm. So I really have a no rooms policy for phone calls. And I think for me, what I try to say to everyone, you learn by osmosis. So the more calls you make, the better that you'll actually get. But the most important thing for me is the feedback loop, because there will be really experienced consultants all around you that are listening to what you're saying, and they're going to pick up in some little things that you might think is a bit of a criticism, but it's actually not. It's just a point where you can just sharpen up to make that call more effective next time. What you usually find, I don't know if you found this in your time, is the candidate calls then become so easy. Like you just make them left, right, and center. You can make 20 calls a day and you don't think of it. It's the mindset shift when it comes to client. Yeah. And then that's where you start to lose your confidence again. You get the sweats, your hands start shaking. But again, the same rule applies. Sit at your desk and make the call. But what I always say to people is make the hardest call first. Make the call to the person that you do not know, and make the call to the person that we may not have spoken to for quite a while. Because I think that's the calls that you typically learn on the most. Yeah. I don't know if your experience is the same, but
it was, you kind of just have to get on with it and do it. But the moment you get a few out the way, they just become easier and easier. Yeah. If you just decide 1 week I'm going to do 100, if you do 100 in a week, it could take you 4 weeks to do that. You'll just be quicker in double the time. So,
and the thing is, when you go into an agency like say Michael Page, like I think the bigger players the generalists out there, as I would say, is a really good training ground, right? I think it builds really solid foundations about what it actually takes to be successful in recruitment. And a lot of that is just about activity and repetition of that activity piece, right? And as you get more experienced and you start to really carve out your niche in the market and your brand in the market, it becomes easier. You don't necessarily have to make as many calls as you do, or you don't have to do as many maybe meetings as you do, just because you've built up your brand, you've built up your network, and you really own that. Yeah, and I think you had Nat Rogers on, one of my colleagues not so long ago, and that's one thing that she's actually phenomenal about, is just building her network and nurturing that and making her network work for her. But for people who start their careers really early on in recruitment, they don't understand or appreciate, and that's maybe one of the things that I learned, is how hard you've got to work to build that.
That's good advice, yeah, because it doesn't just happen overnight, right? You've got to put the yards in.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things for me, is when we see the new generation of recruiters coming to the market, particularly those that maybe started over the COVID times when it was a much easier market. You could make money very, very easily, but you didn't really learn the proper recruitment craft. But then when things start to turn and change, it's harder. But the part that they missed out was just the investment in the activity and the repetition and the consistency of that is the part that kind of, I think, makes such a difference.
Got to do the reps.
You got to do it. It's like anything in life, right? If you don't work hard enough at it, you're just not going to get anywhere.
Going back to your kind of early career, so you left recruitment after a bit, didn't you? You went back into retail for a period of time?
Yeah, I went to Woolworths.
Okay. Did anything happen? What prompted that move back into the space you were originally from?
I actually had a bit of a wobble, and like, you're an expat as well, you know yourself. You do a year or so, and you're like, I'm starting to miss home, starting to miss friends. You're starting to kind of just think about, is Australia really what you want long term? Because you really then need to start thinking about, if you're putting down roots, do you want is permanent residency in your future, is citizenship in your future? There's a lot of big decisions that come up, and it can get quite overwhelming. But in all honesty, I had learned a lot in the year I was with Michael Page, but there's a couple of things that I was really challenged with. Number one was about, I guess, and this has been really open and honest, was about identity. And what I mean by that is that I think that there is a playbook, particularly in larger agencies, that you've got to follow. So you can't really be authentically yourself. I really struggled with that. And there's some really, like, for me, some examples that stood out when I'm, say, sitting in front of clients and, you're taking a job brief and you're really trying to understand what they're looking for. But it was less for me about the problem I'm trying to solve, but more about trying to win the work. Yeah. And then the other side of that is once you've won work, it's about winning more. So then all it is just about job filling. And I really struggled with the fact that I wasn't comfortable with that. But also, and I think, I'm not saying that this is specifically a Michael Page thing, but I actually think more of an industry thing as it was then, particularly in those bigger players, is you've got to follow the playbook. So you don't allow your personality to shine through. You've got to really play by the rules that they kind of set. And I just didn't really like that. So if I'm sitting in front of you, I can't be authentically you, because I can't share about who I am, what I'm passionate about. It's all about a transaction of business. And that just wasn't me. So I think that compound effect of getting a bit homesick and then in an environment where I wasn't being authentic just wasn't the right combination. And I thought, just go back to retail, give it a crack and see if that just sparks something new, or you go back to the UK.
That's good. Well, that's honest insight, and I appreciate that. And you did that, but then you did return back to recruitment. Yes. So there must have been some itch that wasn't fully scratched in there.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was. There was an itch. And I still remember the calls. I was doing well at Woolies, and I was really enjoying it. And say I was kind of, this is retail. This is what I really like. It's what I really enjoy. But then I got a call from Richard Wynne, so Melbourne,
and he's pretty influential. Yeah,
he's very influential. But that Melbourne, right? You get really cold winters, and even though I'm Scottish, I hate the cold, and I had somewhat acclimatized. So he called me. It was June, and it was pouring a rain, and he's like, "I've done something." I was like, "What have you done this time?" He's like, "I've set up a business," and I was like, "Oh, good on you." He's like, "I want you to come and work for me," and that was Future You. Yep. So it so happens I was going up to Sydney 2 weeks later, and I caught up with him in Warren Coxall. Went for a couple of wines, had a chat, told me what he wanted to do. And he's like, just come and give it a crack. Like, Sydney is where it is at. The sun shines, the people are great. We're all up here. It's just going to be like old times, but even better. Yeah. And when I came to Australia, I just said to myself one thing, is as long as you're having fun and on an adventure, keep going. If you're not, then stop what you're doing, take stock and do something else. And I kind of thought, yeah, back in retail is a bit same. Got an opportunity here. Last throw of the dice. Give recruitment another crack, and it's going to be with people that you really know, respect, and could see yourself being part of. So basically packed up the car and drove to Sydney a month later.
And clearly it was the right call because you're still in recruitment. And how long were you with Future You in total?
Or 2 and a bit years.
2 and a bit years. And then 6 Degrees came into play. And did you move into a manager role there, right?
I did, yeah.
Tell me about that, because you obviously your job has expanded in that time. But when you first took the role at 6 Degrees, which is an incredible company, by the way, very good reputation. Talk to me about the move. What prompted it? Was it just the opportunity itself?
Well, I think there was a couple of factors. When you're part of a business that just grows and grows really, really quickly, it's an exciting place to be, and you learn so much. And I think you get to work with an amazing group of people that a lot of them are still now really good mates. In fact, my best mates and very close friends have come through, that experience. But I think I just really had outgrown the business. But also for them, they started to normalize, and where they wanted to focus their attention was not in retail. And retail is what I was really passionate about. I'd actually built a successful retail business for them, but it was clearly that wasn't going anywhere. And going back to what I'd said earlier about authenticity, I can't be authentically myself if I'm not recruiting in a space that I'm not passionate about, but also that the business wasn't willing to invest in at that point in time. Understand why, because that was a fair call for them. That didn't fit in with their business strategy. But it was that time that Ivor Lloyd-Rees had dropped me a message, and was the then manager for sales and marketing, and just said, did you want to have a chat with me? I was like, oh yeah, we'll have a coffee. And the rest was kind of history there.
Timing.
Yeah, timing. And they wanted to set up retail. And I thought, I've done this before. Let's just go and give it a crack. And I thought, this will be my last throw of the dice this time. And then I'll be 8 years in September. And still here, still enjoying it.
So you are now looking after retail, supply chain, you went to retail, supply chain and logistics, started to diversify, I guess, the discipline.
So what had happened is that we set up retail, but it was really challenging points. That was 2018. The market had taken a bit of a turn, and there just wasn't the traction I expected to get. But I think this is one thing that I really love about 6 Degrees. It's all about opportunity creation. So if you are there and that you're showing that you're willing to work hard, put a lot into it, but add the value where you can add value, the business will back you, right? And I think that's one of the reasons that I joined, and it's been one of the central themes throughout my career as well with them. So because retail was really slow at the time, and that can happen, right? The market just slows down. A couple of key industries or verticals might take a turn, and that there's just not as much opportunity there. They said, why don't you do supply chain, give it a crack there? And I was like, oh, I don't know anything about supply chain. It's just trucks and sheds, right? And I was like, but, it's like, I'm a retailer. I love retail. And they're like, no, just give it a crack. And I did. So I moved in there, and slowly over time, I actually moved away from retail completely, and we focused on that more nationally. Yeah. And then I actually just found supply chain, procurement, logistics, and distribution really interesting.
So is it quite different in terms of the types of conversations you're having with senior supply chain people versus senior retail people? How does it kind of differ for somebody who might not know the difference?
Whilst the role types and form and function is different, what you're really exploring with them is quite the same. So let's say that I'm dealing with the supply chain division within a retail business. That's a lot of transferable knowledge. If I switch that over into B2B services or industrial, or maybe into consumer, it's slightly different, but the dynamic what you talk about is almost the same. So you think about, we always talk about the kind of the funnel, the discovery phase, right? So what's going on in your business? What's some of the challenges? What's the what's the opportunities? Where's your focus at? What's the talent strategy? All these are interconnected. So it does not matter whether you're doing sales, marketing, supply chain, retail. That's your starting point. And then the only nuances then that happen is what's unique to form and function of each of those roles, but also what's happening within those specific industries, right? But I think for me, the core, and I was having a chat to one of my colleagues about this the other week there, is it's about curiosity. You've got to be able to have a conversation with someone and be curious enough to explore all areas, because the more you know, the better it is, I think, to try and get a really good understanding on what's going on out there, but then how all the dots join. So I think the reality is it's not significantly different. Once you've learned the role types and how it all connects into the business, it just feeds into that wider picture.
I was going to say, because I've often thought, you specialize in retail, went into retail, so you can talk the language, you have the credibility, then you slightly deviate from that. Was there a pretty steep learning curve in terms of what do I need to do here just to get my level to what it was in retail? Or was it just what you said there? Transfers should still be the same.
This is where I should say you fake it till you make it, shouldn't I?
Everybody does it, don't worry.
And that's an element of it's an element of anything you go into, right? You've kind of got to play the part until you're really in it. Let me think about that one. Like, I think for me, and this is what I would actually say, and if anyone is listening to this and thinking about, I want to change into a different industry, different desk, maybe a bit nervous about it, or that they're looking to start in recruitment, but where they might want to look is not linked into where their background is that start at the bottom. So irrespective of whether I was leading a supply chain team of 4 people that knew significantly more about supply chain, logistics and procurement than I did. But I learned from them. But the other thing is you got to roll up your sleeves and get on the tools. So if you've got to recruit, a supply chain coordinator, or if you've got to recruit a transport planner, and at the time that those were kind of sub 100K roles, sure, I'd been used to recruiting the 200, the 250s, the 350s, 400K roles, but well, I've got to learn something new. But for me, that's what I did. Just started at the bottom. But it's what I always tell people that are coming into recruitment as well. You will learn the most by having conversations, particularly with candidates. They are the source of all knowledge and gossip sometimes. If you're in a gossip, you call your candidates, but that's kind of it. So the more conversations you have, particularly with your candidate base, the more candidates you meet. And if you're willing to roll up your sleeves and recruit any roles within those industries or within those role types, you will learn and you will pick it up pretty quickly. Yeah. Because then it just, once you've understood what good looks like, the rest of it falls into place. Because going back to what I said before, if you can really have that higher level commercial conversation, you can join the dots there, and now you're just each of the functions, how it plugs into that wider commercial picture. So,
and I've got a question, and the reason I asked the question is I got taught when I was actually working in the US that by an RMD at Michael Page actually said there are 3 key things when you're coaching your team. One is recruitment capability, and that's your job as a leader to make sure they're capable and you can train them or what have you. One is their natural talent, and hopefully we've retained or hired the right kind of people. But that market knowledge is something that only they can do. So in your experience, when you're running a team, are there any things that you focus on particularly to help them be better recruiters? Or is it all of the above?
It's all of the above, right? I think for me, I always say to my guys and anyone new that joins our business and they get to spend a bit of time with me, is it's all about the aggregation of marginal gains, right? It's all about the 1%. You've got to focus on being 1% better across all of those kind of key areas. And my advice is the absolute same for anyone, irrespective of what level that there is. So I don't think that there's any particular formula that actually works in that. But you're actually right. You make a really important point. So if I think about, there's capability, there's confidence. I think that, capacity as well is one of the other C's that you might kind of look at. But I think when you're learning that piece, you've got to put yourself out there and have a mind. I always use the phrase open to everything and closed to nothing. Because if you've got a really closed mind, you ain't going to learn anything. And you've got to push yourself to really get underneath the hood of what's there. But I always say one of the unique things about recruitment is you're almost paid to have a conversation. So the more you can talk, the more you can find out. The more you find out, the more knowledge base you gain. The more knowledge base you gain, the more confident you become. And then if you become, you have that confidence, and I keep saying the same thing, you then start to, join all the dots, and you're like, actually, this is how this thing works. But I think it's really important that as a starting basis, you've got to be open to having the conversation. And like I said, the bulk of what you're going to do is focus on those conversations with candidates. I think it's actually more powerful than actually the client side.
I've always thought the same thing. It's interesting when I talk to people, like, you have to keep doing the BD, but if you can get across the right candidates and manage them in the right kind of way, changes your proposition.
You know how many eye rolls you get when you say that? 'Cause it's almost like, it's like you're from the old school, but I'm like, it actually works. Recruitment's quite a simple formula. But if you actually just listen to, you might call us oracles, I don't know, but people that have actually been there, done that, lived it, been through so many different cycles, worked in different markets, and have a lot of acquired knowledge and experience. And if they say the same thing, as a new recruiter, 70% of your time spent on candidates will pay dividends in the years to come. And you make that early investment, 3 years later, you've made it.
Running a recruitment agency isn't for everyone, but that's exactly the point. Most people who start one are great recruiters, brilliant on the phone, deep in their market, performing at the highest level. So naturally, starting an agency feels like the logical next step. But being a great recruiter and being a great business owner are two completely different skills. One is about placing people, the other is about building systems, managing cash flow, hiring the right team, and making decisions that compound over years. What got you to the top of the desk won't get you to the top of the business. The people who build agencies that last, that scale, that generate real wealth are the ones that are willing to learn a completely different game. We've helped over 100 founders make that shift from great recruiter to great business owner. And we don't just point you in the right direction, we back you with an entire in-house team across finance, marketing, branding, and partner success to make sure you actually get there. If you're serious about building something of your own, let's have an honest conversation.
And so in your experience, you know, kind of trying to pivot back a little bit to your kind of journey. So you're now running different types of teams, what you started in recruitment with. Did you inherit the teams or did you build them, or a combination of both?
Combination of both.
Yeah. Tell me a bit about how you manage an inherited team versus building. Because in my experience, building's a little bit easier, right? They're the people that you hire rather, they buy into you versus an inherited team. Do you have a slightly different approach for how you manage both? Or
I guess with Queensland, I've inherited a team here. I guess the unique thing is I've been in the business for 8 years. So, you know, a number of the guys that are up here in Brisbane know me from afar. So that's probably been somewhat easier. But when you inherit a team, you have to work so much harder at building that social capital with them. And I've inherited teams where I've had a lot of pushback. You know, as directors, people to say, I don't want you managing me, or I don't know why you're in this job. I remember one person is like, oh, you haven't built as much as me. Why are you managing me? And I'm like, you've probably actually answered your own question.
That question tells me why.
But that's what you tend to get. So you're really just thrown into the deep end. And you learn this in your retail days, it's sink or swim. But if you spend the time really trying to get to know and understand someone, but be really strong and clear in your convictions and expectations and be consistent, then you will make it work. Yeah. And there's only one time that it has not worked. But I think for that clearly just wasn't the right fit overall. But I think if you go in there and you try to change things too quickly and you do not spend the time on the social capital piece, you will get nowhere. Yeah. You absolutely will get nowhere. And you just got to keep at it. Like, you know, there's days where you're like, I'm getting nowhere. This is just not going to work. You know, you go home, you have a beer in the balcony. My husband's like, what's going on? And I was like, I can't do this. And then he's like, you can. And then you're like, yeah, you know what? It's actually more on me than it is with them. But what have I not done? I just have not spent as much time as I should getting to know them before I've started to introduce some of the changes that I want to see.
I want to kind of stay there. We've started to touch on that. So a new manager stepping into a new role, inheriting a team happens all the time, happened for both of us. And it is a challenge, particularly if you start off at a peer level with them. What's some advice that you think they need to do? The social capital piece, definitely. Should they come in, look at making changes quickly? Is there a period of time where they should step back and just observe? What kind of guidance would you give a new manager stepping into that kind of role?
I think it just depends on the situation. But what I've learned, irrespective of whether it's within retail or whether it's in recruitment, or even experience what I've seen with some of my clients as well when they're asking me, like, how would you approach this if I'm going to bring someone in new, this is the considerations I've got to make with the team, is you've probably got to do quite a few things at the same time. But I actually just always talk about the quick wins. Where can you just make some quick wins in the team? Sometimes it's about demonstration. So, an example that I'll share without naming names in this one, in case they decide to listen to this podcast, but is that, a consultant was in a really tricky spot. I was 6 months in the role, and we hadn't really found a good working rhythm together. And there was a lot of pushback, and it was really hard to try and get any traction with them at all. But then one day they hit a really tricky spot with a client situation, and that they couldn't get themselves out of it, came to me. What do? You step in, you help, and that advice and actually the support piece works. But it's the same as well. Like if you think about you inherit a team, and the transition actually from consultant into manager is a huge transition. Yeah. And most businesses don't have a transition program that I've seen that's been very effective. And for me, I always say to people is that, yeah, all the social capital piece is really important. You do have to kind of really position yourself as the manager of that team, know what you stand for, be clear on expectations. But actually, if you can help someone out, if they have just got themselves into a spot where they need some help, if you can help without asking for anything back, that makes such a difference. And that's what I talk about, those short-term wins. You can just kick a few short-term goals that is a bit of a mind shift set for someone else, and usually then you find that people will start to kind of buy into you a bit better. They'll go on the journey with you, and then that's where you actually have permission then to start making some more of those changes that you want. But I actually think you grow in confidence as well. So you think you give a little, but you can get a lot back. But you just got to put yourself in a position where you can create and demonstrate that value to them. And it's always worked. Retail, recruitment. It's kind of surprising. Maybe that is the secret sauce.
Yeah. Obviously, 6 Degrees will do everything all the way up to executive search and what have you. When you're looking at recruiters, and because I think a lot of people think, oh, that's where I want to end up, and not everyone's cut out for that kind of work. Do you look for anything in particular in terms of the types of people that should end up in a search role, maybe stay focused in temp or different industries? Are there things that you look for?
I would say that probably exec search is more of an evolution as someone develops in their recruitment career. So if I put exec search to the side, and that, because I think that is quite unique, I would say that temp and perm, the one thing is just it's all about character, right? For me, temp contracting is about pace. How does someone operate when you meet them at first? What is the pace of the conversation? You just know, like, what is it that's important to them? How do they move? How do they operate? What are they motivated by? And that's a really interesting one. You typically find that a temp recruiter to a contract, a perm recruiter, actually very different expectations and what they want to get out of it. And I think that's what you tend to look for. And it mainly is just how they operate, how they come across, to decide where they go in. But what I actually do like, all of that aside, is I think they should try both at some point in their career. I'm a terrible temp recruiter because I like a really good process, right? I like to spend
I like
time.
the big fees at the end.
Yeah, big fees, but also I just like the time to be able to go out there into market, have those conversations, do those searches, and run the process. I've done a couple of temp roles in my time, and I actually just get really overwhelmed by it. But it just takes a special type of person, I think, to be really successful at it.
Yeah, no, that's really good answer. So 3 months into the role at 3 months?
Well, yeah, I'm in month 3 now.
How's it going?
Good. Good.
Cut.
I'm really happy that I've made the move. I was ready for a change in my career. I knew that I wanted to stay with 6 Degrees, but I'm actually really happy that we made the move. It is a challenge, right? A challenge and a half. And I spoke about, consultant to manager. There's no transition program. From manager, senior manager up to state director, there's no transition manual either in that. Now, the business has been great at supporting me, and I had a slow introduction into it. But then as soon as you're in the seat, you're like, okay, it is with me now. So I think for me, it has absolutely been a challenge. There has been a lot of upside in some things that I've really relished and enjoyed. But there is parts of that I'm working through now, and a big part of that's actually imposter syndrome, right? Because it's almost like you've got this role now, you've got a seat at the ELT. Should I actually be here? The conversations I'll have with people like Susie or John or Kristen is like, you've absolutely earned it. You're the right person for it. But that just voice in the head sits there.
I think you have it at every level you operate at. You'd have probably had it going in to be a consultant from, I think you just do. And it's a case of recognizing that's part of the journey, isn't it? And just working through it. But clearly you're in there now, 3 months in, which is a very short period of time. What kind of things do you think change in how you have to approach things when you become a state director versus being a senior manager or a manager? Is there anything that you've picked up in the first 3 months that I've got to think like this now versus this?
So there's a couple of things that I look at, and if I put it into the kind of the buckets, I'll give you an insight into my 6-month plan, right? Is that it's people, it's performance, and it's customer, and it's just 3 really clear buckets. Now, in my role previously, I'm running the supply chain logistics procurement team, and that is my sole focus. Yeah, sure, I'm taking on some additional roles and opening up new business and developing client relationships, but I was predominantly just focused on my division with some support. Now it is about the strategy that I set is the one that we will take to market that will be effectively growing our business. And that is like a total sea shift change as well.
I can imagine, yeah.
And the biggest part of that is not actually the strategy that you set, because the strategy, like I said, in those kind of 3 key buckets, that's actually the simple part. The hardest part is how do you bring the team on the journey, but then how do you think about bringing in new talent to get you on that journey as well? So I think for me is that because I had been in my role previously for a number of years, I was very comfortable in it. I knew my role, I knew my place, but now I'm trying to figure out what it actually all means. And really the reality is the buck stops with you. If you are making a commitment to grow, then your growth strategy is what you will be measured on. And that's a massive jump, because we've got so many great people around the business that have been there and done it, but they're not living your journey, right? I'm living it. And for me, that is the exciting part, scary part, but the one that I know is really going to define me and my time here in this role.
You've answered a few questions that I was going to ask about the hardest part of it. But something I think about is, as you move through your career, you become more senior, the people you can talk to about stuff becomes less and less and less. When you're a consultant, everyone's a consultant. When you become manager, there's less, but you're moving towards the peak. Do you still, or where do you go for your advice? Is there still your peer group that you go to now because you just stepped into the role? I always thought to myself, I don't want to show my weaknesses around this, or is it such a group where you can just talk to them about anything?
So we recently did a leadership program called Change Up, run by Mim Bartlett. Absolutely worthwhile checking out the work that she does. And one of the things that she spoke about in there is having your personal board, right? Every business has a board, and that board has got advisors in there, and they work with you to challenge thinking and setting strategy, etc. But a lot of people don't think about having the same in life in your personal board there. But actually then it really got me thinking of, who do I need round about me to be really successful in this role? So like one of my biggest mentors is my former state director, Al Penny. Al, and he for me is a phenomenal individual. I love him dearly, and he's there as a friend, but also as really, really good counsel. Now, the hard thing is I can't just go and take a walk around Sydney with him now. I've got to phone him, and it's a slightly different experience. But what I've found now is that just having conversations with people that I know that are going to give me really solid advice is going to work. But it's really important for me that I also pick those people that are going to challenge me. So there's certain things I wouldn't necessarily talk to one person about, but I would the other, because I know that they're going to be like, right, here's what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. And I'm just going to give it to you straight. And I'm like, I love that, because that's really what I need. It's like just, really challenging your thinking. but sometimes I need people to just go to and have a bit of a hug, right? It's like, put your arm around me, just tell me it's going to be all
Gonna
right.
be fine.
And that's your friendship group, and that's what they're there for. So I think it's like, for me, I couldn't do what I'm doing now if I didn't have what I would say is my personal board around me. But really thinking about the position that each of those people play, and knowing that I can go to them for different people. The one thing that I'm just getting used to now is I don't necessarily have the same people around me that I had in Sydney, but I'm now starting to build that up here. So, someone like Kristen, she's amazing. Like, she set up the Queensland business. We celebrate our 10-year anniversary in January. So
That's
10
gone
years.
fast. I remember when it was happening. Yeah.
It's like gone by in the blink of an eye, and we're at this next stage in her journey, but she's lived and breathed it. And she's just a phenomenal individual. But, I was having a wine with her on Friday night, and just to hear more of her story and how she's approached it, the trials and tribulations of setting up a business and what she's learned and how she's grown and evolved through it. Like, for me, that's a really powerful thing, right? And I'm not just paying that lip service. Like, that's really a valuable person to have in my life now that helps me in my journey. So, as I said, whether I need a kick up the ass or I need a cuddle, I've got people out there that will help me do it.
That's awesome. And moving into the recruitment world today, so it would be remiss of me not to ask about AI and recruiters out there. How should they be using it? We talk about being expertly human. How should recruiters, in your experience, be using AI versus this should remain your own? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I do, and I did read a couple of questions, and I thought I'm going to feed this into ChatGPT and Claude. I use both, see what they say, and I'm like, none of this is authentically me. It's that you've given me a stock standard answer, and I think that for me that really tells the story, right? AI is a great enabler. 6 Degrees are adopting AI in our business, and it is honestly changing the way that we work. But our focus in our business, and I've been involved in a few projects in and around it. So one of the most exciting I've been working on is our sourcing stack, right? So thinking about our paid platforms versus in-house platforms and what the best sourcing stack looks like for consultants. And we know that AI plays a big part there, but ultimately out of all that, we just want to make sure that we can give consultants time back to be in market, to have those conversations, to have those face-to-face, human interactions, candidates, clients. That's really, really important. But to enable that, we need things that are going to make things more effective, more efficient, more streamlined, and drive better enablement. And it is changing a lot. And it's I think it's an exciting journey, but also a scary journey. And a lot of people are not sure where it's kind of going to go. But I think for me, as it currently stands, the important thing is that what is the things that it can do to help us be better at? Where does it remove repetition? Where does it remove duplication of tasks? It's those things that are really important where the value add is returned, because consultants are spending less time managing submissions, or that they're finding candidates much easier and quicker. They're being able to do more analysis than they have before, to have more commercially driven conversations with clients. That's where it's making a difference.
So ensuring it doesn't replace you, of course, but can facilitate.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've started to use it more, to be honest, and I'm still pretty basic. Make this content look pretty versus actually helping it facilitate being more efficient, I guess.
I'm a software engineer by trade, right? It's a bit weird, so software engineering to retail to recruitment. But I just easily built an app on Claude that actually helps me with team one-to-ones. So I'm a really detailed person, right? My team will tell you that, is I love the detail, right? And I like to do follow-ups and all that stuff. But it's so time consuming. So you step up into the role that I'm in now as State Director, and I've got a lot of different responsibilities, and you easily drain time. And I thought, I want to do value-driven one-to-ones. I'm across a lot of information, different consultants, all at different places. How do I help me do it? So I just thought, right, I'm going to use Claude, built an app off the back of it, and now it helps me prepare for my one-to-ones.
Can you share that with me?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But it does that, but it also generates the content as well that I need that. So whether I'm sharing it on or I use it for review points. But for me, that's given me back probably about 3 hours a week. That's really, that is genuinely 3 hours of my time that I can now focus on training and development, or being out in market with clients, developing those relationships, or being on the tools at the minute in recruiting roles. So that's just one task you replicate that across many, imagine the difference that makes.
That is really good, because I remember when I was looking after bigger teams, you tend just to go back to back to back to back because everyone thinks you've got half an hour in your calendar. It's free and you never have time to prep. And so you're doing your team a disservice by not being ready for them. And so things like that are really, really good insight. What do you think recruiters nowadays don't do enough of that they should be doing to help them perform?
This might be controversial, but I actually just think it is the investment in refining their craft, right? And for me, that is about intensity of activity. If you drive the right activity in the right way, you will be successful, but you have to be committed to the time that takes. So I spoke about Nat Rogers earlier, and she's a phenomenal individual. And one of the things that really impresses me about her, and one of my team, she mentors them, and it is really about that you do the hard yards in years 1 to 3. Years 1 to 3, you really got to work hard. But after that, it actually becomes a little bit easier. But it only becomes easier because you spent 3 years building up your network and nurturing that network, both candidates and clients. But you cannot do that unless you're just being very activity focused. Right activity at the right time will drive the right results, but it's a longer term investment play. But most new consultants coming in are looking for the quick, easy wins. They get a bit of a taste of it. They might have a good quarter. They might have a good half. They could even have a good year, but then the wheels fall off. And then they're like, what am I doing? You're not a bad recruiter. You're a really good, you're a good recruiter. You've shown it, but you haven't spent the time learning your craft. You have not spent the time building your networks, cultivating those networks. You've looked for the quick, easy wins, which on paper make you look good. You picked up a bit of comms. Now you know you want to stay in recruitment. What are you going to do? Well, you need to actually do the work. So I actually just think that for me, it's all about the right activity at the right time will just drive the right outcomes. It's a dead simple formula. But at the end of the day, once you've done that, you've really then built, I think, what is a successful brand and market with a successful network. And it's what you really need, I think, to be, a really successful recruiter.
Good advice. There's no shortcut to those first few years, is there? You just have to do it.
I wish there was. It's like, I wish that. But part of it is actually the journey, right? It's an old adage. It's like, I remember my dad saying to me, it's like, oh, you enjoy the journey. And I was like, oh, no, I just want to be really successful in my career, make a lot of money. And he's like, yeah, but how do you think you actually get there? Do you think I just woke up one day and I was successful and all that? And he's like, you got to work. But I think it's only when you get those, when you kind of get that feeling of it's actually worth it, you go on that journey. Like it's all part of it.
What's the best bit of advice you've received in your recruitment career, do you think?
There's one that someone told me to change my accent, but
become English.
I think the one piece of advice that I've got that's stayed with me throughout all of this is just do it. Like that is as simple as that, because if you do it, things will happen. You don't want to pick up the phone, just do it. It happens, you don't want to meet this candidate for whatever reason it is, just do it. It could just be the game changer that you need. You've got a really good candidate that you want to get out to market, floats are biting. Oh, I don't have time to do it, just do it. And actually that mentality changes everything for me. So in those down moments, or where you're kind of maybe lacking a bit of confidence in yourself, or you're going through a bit of a rough ride, just do it, because it makes all the difference.
We're called Confessions of a Recruiter. I'm sure there's plenty here, but I'll have to ask a question. Any wild stories, any confessions that you PG enough to share, do you think?
Jeez, what do you want?
No.
Actually, mine is not necessarily. It's more about the fun stuff, like the events that you have with people. But one of the funniest ones that I ever had, and this is when I realized that recruitment can be an awesome industry to be in. So I was Michael Page at the time. I couldn't share this, and it was a fancy dress party. And I dressed up as Catwoman. Richard Wynn dressed up as Batman, and one of our colleagues, can't quite remember who it was, dressed up as Robin. We were in Melbourne at the time, right? And I don't know if you've ever seen Only Fools and Horses.
I have, yeah.
The scene with Del White
that's
and
a very
Rodney.
famous scene.
That literally happened. So we were running down Burke Street, heading on to our Halloween party or whatever it was. And the city was really foggy that night as well. So it's just like, you see all these car lights, and then you've got me dressed as Catwoman and those guys as
the boy
Batman and
wonder
Robin running down there. But that probably stands out for me. It's just one of the weirdest, wackiest moments. But actually where I thought recruitment can just be such a really great career, but a great place to be, especially when you find and being in and around people that you really like.
You meet incredible people in recruitment, you really do. Whether you stay in the industry, whether you leave it, and I'm in the industry again, but I spent years out of it and miss the people that I met in that industry. Chris, really, really amazing conversation. You're obviously on a journey with 6 Degrees. If there's anyone out there who clients, candidates, consultants who want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to find you?
You can DM me on LinkedIn or do the smart thing, look at my contact info, my mobile numbers there, give me a buzz. I'm always up for a yarn.
Perfect. Chris, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, mate.